Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Red Notice. So, right off the bat, I would obviously have to say, for this being a Netflix film, this film is okay. It's like just reasonably an okay film. It has to really get carried by Ryan Reynolds because Gal Gadot is barely irrelevant character here, and Dwayne is giving a Dwayne performance. Like, hey, have we seen Dwayne in any massively different role than he's ever probably done? Maybe in Faster. Maybe that was like one where it felt like unique, somewhat performance. And maybe Pain and Gain was maybe a slightly different performance than what he's kind of delivered. Or maybe the no, that's it. Like, but that's really scraping to just try to like think that Dwayne can give you some different kinds of shades of character besides what he's always been, who has just been Dwayne. Through every one of these films, everyone gripes about it. There's nothing we can do. It's not like all of a sudden Dwayne is finally going to go and do dramas or do or do something that really shows like a real portfolio of Dwayne, in all honesty. But hey, at least Dwayne does earn his check in this movie, where Gal just kind of shows up, just appears at the tail end of every bit of every conversation, and then leaves just as quickly. It's like, man, anyone else who was to have gotten this role before Gal would have just thought, like, man, like, I don't have to do really any work in this film, and I just get to show up and go to all these beautiful locations, and I have a whole like barely hour of a whole day of work. Until we actually get to a cluster of a part of this film where gals actually do things and actually have an action sequence, and wow for her, right? So going into this film, I would possibly say that that this movie, of course, gives you that Indiana Jones, Mission Impossible, the Dwayne the Rock Johnson movie, The Rundown kind of vibes. But there's a fun adventure, but if Ryan Reynolds wouldn't have been in this movie, nobody would have watched it. Nobody would have justified going into it because Dwayne or Gal cannot hold a film if they were to be the ones main focused on here. If there was no Ryan, there would be no movie. There would be no interest in this movie because Ryan is freaking still hilarious in this film. Yeah, he could possibly be approaching this just like he does in Deadpool and a billion other of his movies, because we have so many characters here or to play their one kind of character that they've been given to play for years. So they're going to just keep putting that same kind of character into every single movie they do. But this, like, we could say that Ryan basically carries this film and makes it a fun film. And so, with that said, I think that's all I want to say about this movie in a very describing like sense. Let's tee it up. What is this movie about? Well, this movie is to be about 3 eggs. They had to come up with something. Like, hey guys, what are you gonna do in this one? It's a heist film. Oh great, another heist film. Great. Like, if we haven't had like the Army of Thieves, and how many other heist films do you guys think you need to do right now? But this has some Indiana Jones like flavor to it. It has some kind of fun in this movie. We have fun with both Ryan and Dwayne's character because Gal is barely in this movie. And so, like, Gal doesn't even exist in this film, you could basically say. That's how irrelevant her character is in this film. That's a sad part of it. But hey, she's sharing the poster with two other people that are to be in there to be seemingly 90% of the film. There could be some debate for longer than that, but like they're in the movie like 90, like let's go with 80% of the film, and then she's just kind of tossed in there and then leaves. So this movie is about these three egg-like things that are probably to have been actually, God, what were they? Probably actually like rugby balls, because they had that kind of like touch to them. So like this is like the Flash Gordon of things, where we have these rugby balls that are to be painted to be these lavish like eggs that at one point Ryan is to drop, and obviously they don't break. So because it would probably actually just be some rugby ball that they painted to make it look like it. Oh, it's jewels and medallions and whatever. Yeah, I'm sure. It's a really lavish thing. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. So, uh, so it becomes a chase film, or at first it becomes uh, John Hartley, who's played by Dwayne, chasing after Ryan Reynolds' character, who is Nolan. Nolan. They couldn't have called Ryan Reynolds Nolan North in this movie. Wouldn't that have been an interesting thing to go with? They call him Nolan Booth. So Dwayne chases after Ryan, and then they realize, well, like, hey, there needs to be something more in this film. So Gal comes in, and now she is trying to get at the eggs. And but with the way that this is to turn out, there are to be some twists and turns in this movie. It seems that both Dwayne and Ryan forcibly have to partner up here, even though Dwayne's character is to be this FBI agent, which all of a sudden is to be forcibly arrested because they have to kind of question his credentials. So this pushes on to go into a number of different places and scenarios, and whichever a whole prison scene, a whole well, not only the chase scene, but then a prison scene, and then we push on to, of course, Ryan telling us his whole family backstory, so that way he can help us understand where this story is heading, and to have him have some watch that is to help us find this treasure. And so when these two are to go and find this last egg treasure, Gal Gadot is to, of course, swoop in for the 18th time in this film for 10 seconds. And and then we have the Interpol, or the Inspector Yervashi Dawes, come in and have to be like the villain of these thieves in this movie. And so there has to be this kind of Indiana Jones Crystal Skull like battle between these two cars driving in this cave like environment to make our way to have these characters give us this big hook maneuver, which then in turn has us kind of go on to wrapping up this film in a nice, neat little bow. So, with that said, let's go out of our way to go into that double 5 time territory. Let's go into spoilers. So, I'll say that this movie is okay, and that this movie at some points could be fun because Ryan is to do it that way, is to help us find this movie to be fun, and then we have to put up with some kind of crap of having like us know certain backstories of these characters, which anything delivered from anybody besides Ryan is just, it is what it is. So I'm sorry, Dwayne Johnson. I rarely ever like the man's films. I rarely do. And it doesn't help that just consistently, like, I could probably I can probably like a movie like Central Intelligence with Dwayne working off of Kevin Hart. I can like that film. Um, I will never rewatch it, but I can like it. Um, I could like movies like Doom that he was in, because that's a fun action-packed sci-fi movie and whatever. But anything else, it would have to be really early in Dwayne's career, like maybe like the Scorpion King. I could like that, but anything more recently is just the same old, and it gets old. And plus, Dwayne just keeps getting film after film after film after film, and he doesn't give us anything different. So, with that said, spoilers. Spoil it all. So, very beginning of the movie, we have Dwayne as this big FBI guy, John Hartley, who's to be smarter than everyone in the room, because of course he has to be. So, it seems that Dwayne is to go into this big museum that has have this big massive egg, and they're like, oh hey, like no one is gonna get this egg from us, and John is like, ah. So John is to go and have this seemingly weird device that is a showcase that I guess gold would have some kind of weird radiation that comes off of it weirdly. And so the egg is to not actually be this real legitimate egg. So The Rock, John, goes and pours this Coke over this egg to find out that it's a fake, it's a ruse, it's a hilly-billy, willy-nilly fake-like thing. So now they're like, well, obviously Ryan Reynolds has to be somewhere in this museum with this egg, and so now we have to go and find him, and so they do. And so Nolan is running off to try and go through this weird scaffolding that they put in this building, and I'm like, Rush Hour or Shang-Chi. Why in every action movie do they have to kind of create this whole like scaffolding, like fight sequence where like they have to do this like construction thing? I just don't get this, where like a whole wall has to be built, and now there's like this element of like, hey, someone could possibly fall to their death, maybe, or get hindered, possibly, or just be tossed off a really high part of thing. Sure. So Ryan goes and steals a tie from one of the guys and puts this tie on, but then he goes and has one buddy hold on to his tie for whatever goofy reason, as Ryan is trying to fight off John from the roof of this museum, and they're kind of doing this like ladder kind of jumping from scenarios, which I'm like, okay, like I like this part, like the whole like Dwayne trying to chase after Ryan, and like the whole chase of this is like, okay, this is kind of interesting. Like I can get into this part here. The funny part where Norland is to mention about John's jacket, and how there's somewhere where there's a very naked cow out there whispering sweet nothings of saying worth it. When John is to have this cow covered jacket. So Nolan goes off and is to like jump onto this one tent, which leads him on to this motorcycle. And so Dwayne is to try and chase him with his car, which doesn't get very far. So Nolan is to make his way home, and so John is to find him at his home because evidently he knows exactly where John lives, or Nolan lives, I mean. So all of a sudden the police are to be surrounded, and so now John is to mention who basically Nolan is. Just rattles off all of this information, and Nolan is like, this guy is good. So Nolan is to seemingly get arrested because he's probably going to break out a billion times over, but not this time around. So Nolan gets arrested. John goes and puts this egg in a safe, glass-like location for Gal's character, the bishop, to just go and steal this. I'm like, oh no. Gal Gadot has something to do in this movie. Every time Gal Gadot has something to do in this movie, I am just going to be like overwhelmed because the rarity we see this woman. So she steals this egg, and so now everybody is to assume that John, his whole plan was to go and steal this egg himself and to say that Ryan Reynolds did it, that Nolan did it. So they decide to arrest John because his FBI credentials aren't all that concrete. So John and Nolan in prison, sharing prison together, where Nolan is to now tell all the prisoners that John is an FBI guy and like consistently shouting out to the heavens that John is a cop, is a police officer, is a whatever, and to tell the drastic difference, and that probably any number of people that have probably been in this prison have been arrested at some point by John, possibly. And so that immediately leads to where John is getting beat up by one of the prisoners. And so John goes and is to share a cell with Nolan, and so John tells Nolan, you better not ever do that again. So between the two of them, they have to come up with a strategy of escaping prison. So this is like a Tango and Cash, Sylvester Stallone, Kurt Russell kind of moment here where they have to figure out how they can escape this prison. Because Gal Gadot is coming in again. Woo! She has something to do here. And so the bishop is to come in here to have Nolan give up the secret of where the third egg is. And so Nolan's like, I'm not going to tell you. No, I'm not going to tell you. So the bishop is like, well, I could free you guys from this prison if you would only tell me where the third egg is. And Nolan's like, no, not going to tell you. So the bishop is to go off and just be like, oh, well, I guess we're going to just spend a lot of time in this prison. So now we have this backstory of Nolan mentioning that Nolan's father, I guess, was a cop. And so Nolan's father was a cop, and I guess at one point, Nolan was to have had his father thought that Nolan had stolen his watch. And so Nolan's father used to talk to Nolan, and right after Nolan was to have supposedly stolen this watch, Nolan's father stopped talking to him. And every single day, like, just stopped talking to him. Nolan would even start up conversations, ask him things. Father wouldn't have a response. So, all of a sudden one day, Nolan's father would have found out that his watch was to actually be in some kind of random like desk or something like that he just kind of forgot one day. And so all of a sudden, Nolan's father is to have this watch. And so all of a sudden, Nolan's father started talking to Nolan again, and Nolan just stopped talking to him. Son stopped talking to father just because of the real, just like, oh yeah, that's where your watch was the whole time, right? Like, you never apologized to me, freaking right, for thinking that I stole this from you. And so Nolan was to go on and mention that Nolan's father valued that watch more than Nolan, and supposedly Nolan's father went off to go into some kind of weird antique trinket bargain sale of a place to go and get these weird items and to also get this watch. So I'm like, if they're gonna go on and do sequels, is every sequel gonna have like Nolan just arrive with some kind of bizarre gadget that his father was to have at some point because they set that up in this movie? Whatever, right? So now Nolan is to ask John about his father, and John doesn't have any stories. But when we reach the train later, John has a story. So, how we get these guys out of here, out of this prison, is we just have these guys go on and make their way to this helicopter. Quite easily, quite simply, helicopter. So they go on to this helicopter, and the guys are trying to get this helicopter going. It seems that Ryan can easily figure out how to operate this helicopter, but it's all in German, so he can't figure it out quite easily. Dwayne is to be on this bridge that all of a sudden blows up conveniently at the last second, and so Nolan is to go and blast through all these guards to stop them from firing on them, and so John is to go into this helicopter and question if Nolan was going to leave him or not. And John was like, no, or Nolan's like, no, I would have came back. Like, I wouldn't have left you. Come on. So they both go off together, which just leads them to go on to their next form of travel, which is just some train. So, or no, wait, there's a whole like story before we get to that. So they get off this helicopter, and so they go on and divulge this whole story about how they are to get to this third egg, because Ryan is to give them this story about this whole third egg thing. Or no, wait, back up a little bit more. John and Nolan have to go and get the second egg. And so Nolan comes up with this whole like Mission Impossible plan to go and get this second egg, and how they can get this from Sota Voice, who they have to come up with this this face scan like thing and deep fake it and come up with this guy's voice also. And so they come up with some software to get through this security door to get to this egg, and all of a sudden Gal Gadot shows up again to try and prevent these guys from getting this second egg. So they go through this whole plan, masquerade ball and everything, and so John goes off and dances with the bishop, and so we go on and have this whole, like, them trying to go for this egg thing, but miserably fail. So now we push on to have both these characters that are forced to go into traveling by or no wait, they go and they yeah, so they go on, they try to get this egg, they fail. So they go on and now they're being tortured by supposedly Sato, who consistently likes to take off his shirt to show his tattooed like body, and supposedly this guy is to be a torturous guy, and so on and so forth. So instead of torturing Nolan for the information, they torture Hartley instead. They torture Dwayne instead. So they're torturing Dwayne, electrifying him, and all kinds of stuff, and Nolan doesn't give up the information because he doesn't trust anybody. So now that leads with Gal again coming in there, torturing Dwayne, and then leaving. So Sato is to now choke Dwayne, and so what happens is that there is to be like these shots going on to kind of scare these guys, but it seems that one of the cuffs had supposedly gotten loose. To where then Dwayne goes and takes down Soto, and so they end up getting free after Dwayne is to free himself, and then Nolan is to say like, "Hey man, what about me?" And it's like, well, "What about you? Like you didn't, like you let me be tortured." But uh, John is to free Nolan because Nolan knows where the third egg is. So they go off to figuring out this like secret passage, which leads them to this bull rodeo going on, and so Dwayne ends up getting knocked down by this bull, and so Nolan is to tell John that he should not be like he shouldn't run. He like they should be just having these slow movements or not moving at all, and so John is to say where he got that information from, and Nolan is to mention like this some kind of something that continues to sound like Jurassic Park. And so John is like, wait a minute, that's Jurassic Park. Like, was Jeff Goldblum in it? And so Nolan's like, well, yeah, Jeff Goldblum, yeah, that. So John was like, that's Jurassic Park, stupid. So all of a sudden, Bull comes, hits John. So both of them decide to just run anyways, and decide. And this is like, of course, like a CGI bull. Like it obviously showcases that. So both of them run off to the side to avoid this bull, and so the goofy thing of it is we have a whole entire wall that is being made out of like red, which is like, isn't that the attractant bull color where everything is red? And like, wouldn't this bull be ramming against these walls for whatever reason? So now both John and Nolan uh, go off to get a new set of clothes, which leads them to this train where now John is wanting the information of Nolan about where the third egg is, and Nolan won't give it. So John is to lean Nolan off to the side of this train, but Nolan knows that John won't go through with this because he's a good guy. So John is to finally tell the story of his dad and how his dad was a thief, and so John turned to be a cop. So like that whole story, like, was there anything unique about it? Not really. Like, I don't feel like there was a good story coming out of that, but whatever. So Nolan is to say like, well, hey, like, so Nolan's father was a cop, so Nolan turned into a thief. uh, John's father was a thief, so he turned into a cop. So like they're kind of on like the polar opposite sides, but they all try to do the opposite of whatever their father did. So that's the kind of connection between either one of them. So now, with that kind of said, now Nolan is to tell John the story of the third egg and where, not where it is exactly, but to kind of tell him that he has all these items to figure out where the third egg is, which leads them to this journey for them to both go on, which has Nolan have a map that is to be where the location of this place is, but Nolan can't guarantee that this is the actual spot. And so now John is like, God, you took me all the way out here just for us to not be in this actual location, and you don't even know if we're in the right location. But then there's to be banging on this ground of this compass to tell us that they're in the right location. They head to this place that reveals this metal thing of stairs, which leads them to this door that weirdly has Nolan's father's watch open up this door, which then leads them to this treasure trove of German memorabilia of all these statues, all these gold, all these pieces, all of this rare vehicle, and so on and so forth. And they're trying to come up with the idea of why this car had gotten here. If did they take it apart piece by piece by piece to make it here? Did they drive this whole thing in here? And so John is to say that there was probably a way for them to get this vehicle driven into here. And so all of a sudden, after they come up with them finally finding the egg, Gal is to come in again and just be like, hey guys, you found the third egg? Well, like I followed you. Because Nolan finally tells the bishop, which is Gal, that, hey, like, go to Egypt, go to Egypt, go to this certain place, and you'll find the egg there. And so Gal's like, great, I'll go right there. And so when Gal leaves, she ends up just following both of them to find out where they really were to actually go, because it's basically like National Treasure, where like Nicolas Cage does all the heavy lifting, and then Sean Bean comes in and just robs Nicolas Cage of whatever the treasure he was to have gotten was. And that's basically Gal Gadot's character in a nutshell, to just arrive at the last second after these guys have done all the hard work and just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to just take this from you. And that's basically what happens here. So, but the Inspector Doss is to come in and is to guns a-blazing and wants to arrest all these people. And so they decide to go and take the car that Nolan had mentioned had there only been 4 in the world, and decide to go through this tunnel to drive this car. And now there's to be this kind of like grabbing for this egg. Ryan is to be jumping onto the other car to fight off these guys. So on and so forth. There's this big, huge, elaborate fight chase scene that plays out to, of course, be in the favor of the good guys, or in this terms, the thieves. So we have these guys have to like drive through this waterfall that lands them into this water. And so Nolan is to make it out of the water, and then he's like, okay, where is everyone else? So Nolan goes after both John and the bishop and is trying to find out where they are. And so Nolan drops the egg because he had the egg the whole time and goes back for them. And so John is now to realize, like, oh my god, Nolan, like, you went back for me? Like, you were screaming my name and all this and that. And so Nolan was like, no, I went in there because I dropped my phone in there. And I really needed to quickly kind of find my phone so that way I can dip it into some rice and try to. I really needed that phone. And John's like, no, no, no. Like, you were going back for me. You completely forgot about the egg and you were like, you went back for me. And Nolan's like, okay, fine. So I went back. So what? So all of a sudden, then Gal Gadot is to finally just wash up onto shore, gagging with water and whatever. And so now that Nolan is to have this egg and the bishop doesn't, now Nolan is just like, ha ha ha, you have egg on your face. Look at me, I have this and you don't. Blah, blah, blah. So this goes on for a while about how Nolan is like, man, just the look on your face, whatever. So we finally just find out here's the hook, the goofy thing, the whatever. So both The Rock and the Bishop are to actually be a couple. They kiss, and so Nolan's like, oh, so you guys were in cahoots the whole time? And so now we have to showcase through the entire movie that at some points there were some moments where John was kissing up on Bishop while they were dancing, and that John was handing off the one egg to the bishop, and they were working together the whole entire time, even though it looked like they were fighting one another. Because in chess, there are technically two bishops on the board, and so they're both technically bishops. So it's like, oh, how great was that? How much of a swerve was that? So Gal Gadot thrusts her gun out to forcibly have Nolan surrender this egg. And so Nolan's like, hey, that gun's filled with water. There's no way it's going to work. Pow! Okay, he's like, ha, like, I'm not going to die. Here's the egg. So Nolan gets arrested and is to now just be left out in some forest somewhere or some wilderness somewhere for him to just be tan as F, because evidently Nolan is to desperately ask, like, hey, do you guys have sunblock? Because this tan is fake. It's a spray tan. So so both Gal and both Rock just go off to deliver these eggs to some wedding as a present, and don't know why these eggs are given to these people, but they are. And so all of a sudden, Ed Sheeran is to come in and start like singing some song of his. Big ups to Ed Sheeran in this movie. He's from Game of Thrones, and he's freaking Ed Sheeran. So yeah, like nobody better F with this guy. He should actually have his own action movie. They should have a whole spin-off where it's like Ed Sheeran and the debacle of him getting arrested at the end of this movie. So John is to go on and see Ed Sheeran and just be like, yeah, like Ed Sheeran, who would have thought? Because evidently this girl, whoever is to be married off here at the end of this movie, is to be a big Ed Sheeran fan, to where she's wanting to share the stage or whatever that Ed Sheeran is on with him, and so on and so forth. So Ed Sheeran just kind of rattles off some song for like 20 seconds of this, and then all of a sudden, Inspector Doss just starts arresting people, even Ed Sheeran, and And so then uh, both John and the bishop are to kind of uh, escape from out of this scenario to go on to be on some boat. To where all of a sudden Nolan is to arrive and just be eating this pork of sorts because he assumes it's cheese, and the bishop or gal is just like, oh no, that's raw pork, and he's like, like, so Nolan is to kind of set up here that there is to be a whole another heist that they are to go on, and so Nolan wants them to team up with him to do this heist. And so they're like, well, that sounds great. And so Nolan's like, well, okay, like, because we find out that Nolan had been caught by Inspector Doss, but Nolan escaped because he had a key with him. Because he can, I guess he has the master plan of being able to figure out that he can have a key that just plooshes out from his mouth and he can escape at any time because he's basically Houdini. So you would have thought that like Nolan would have escaped way earlier than that, but I guess conveniently he doesn't. So, but then instead of letting both John and the bishop getting arrested, he takes them on some other boat for them to go off and do this other heist that I guess is to be by the Louvre of the Louvre. If you guys have seen probably the Da Vinci Code and a number of other films, you've probably seen the Louvre. If you've probably seen also The Edge of Tomorrow, you've probably seen this same kind of thing at some point in time. So they just start walking off onto the Louvre, and that's how we end this film for whatever reason. And so I'm like, are they going to just tease that there's already going to be a sequel in place of this movie? Because they naturally assume that enough people are probably going to watch this film to garner there to be a sequel. And they're basically just saying, like, hey guys, to be continued because there's going to be another one of these. So, with that said, I think that's all I wanted to say about this film. I kind of rushed through it because Ryan Reynolds' comedy is going to sell you on this film, and why even bother reviewing this movie? Because it's basically going to ride on Ryan Reynolds. Because who cares about anything else? So with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here because go ahead and check this movie out. So without a doubt, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.